hybrid coasters, mega coasters and big dippers. I'm Rollercoaster David, and this is Coasting into Walibi Holland. Walibi Holland is one of the top parks in the Netherlands. Located a short distance from Amsterdam, it's home to 7 roller coasters, and this year saw the opening of Untamed, the first RMC Hybrid coaster to open in Europe.
So today I'm at Walibi Holland and I've been riding Untamed. It's Europe's first RMC Hybrid coaster, and as such it's kind of a big thing.
Over the last few years, Rocky Mountain Construction, or RMC, have taken the coaster industry by storm, replacing the track of old wooden coasters with modern steel rails on top of the old coasters' wooden supports. They've created several new elements and generally make coasters unlike any of their competitors, with crazy twists and intense airtime, resulting in hugely popular rides.
The coaster itself used to actually be called Robin Hood and was a wooden coaster. Then RMC got their hands on it this year, and now it's an amazing hybrid.
Whilst Robin Hood wasn't exactly a bad coaster, it had begun to get a bit rough and decline in popularity, and the new conversion to Untamed is fantastic. Untamed increases the height to nearly 120 feet, and also increases the speed to 57 miles an hour, giving a shorter but much more intense and fun ride. One thing I like is how they've incorporated some of the old Robin Hood coaster into the theming, with wood from the track forming a sort of monument, and the old train sitting on a section of track forming a bridge over the queue. The ride starts with a strangely outside banked left turn that does feel a bit awkward, but thankfully this is the only bit of the ride that does. After that you ascend the lift hill into the first drop, followed by a very brief pop of airtime over a small hump before you hit the first element proper. The first element after the drop is a really unique one, called a 270-degree double inverting stall. They count it as 2 inversions, but it's more like 1. It feels like a cross between a wave turn and a zero-G stall, and unlike some of the other unique RMC elements, it's a really smooth transition and is great fun. I'd been worried that it would feel a bit awkward and uncomfortable, like the twisted snake dive on Steel Vengeance, but the way the train glides through it so smoothly as you float in zero gravity is just sublime. After the first element, it's a mix of airtime, sideways airtime, inversions, and a well-paced, enjoyable layout. Towards the end, the elements come thick and fast, with rapid pops of airtime, and one final inversion close to the ground before you slam into the brakes. I do particularly like that final inversion, as it's so close to the ground it really takes you by surprise, as the earth flashes above your head. Despite the name, in the morning when the coaster is warming up, this is probably one of the tamer RMCs, although it does get a bit more aggressive and forceful as the day goes on. Earlier in the day, it actually gives a very floaty ride, but as with Zadra, as the day goes on it gets faster and faster, and the airtime becomes more ejector than floater. The theming of the ride is a bit unusual as well. I think it was supposed to be wilderness or overgrown area, but with the lights on the lift hill spelling love and be brave on the station, one of my friends thought the theme was best described as Instagram. Walibi Holland is also home to one of my favourite boomerang coasters, Speed of Sound. Boomerang coasters are one of the most common coasters you find in parks, consisting of a cobra roll and a vertical loop, which you first go through forwards, then backwards. So what exactly makes this one stand out from all the rest? For a start, it has new style trains, which makes a huge difference. Standard boomerangs generally have rather uncomfy and headbanging over-the-shoulder restraints, but these new trains have vest restraints, eliminating the headbanging these rides are notorious for. In addition, there's an onboard soundtrack that plays during the ride, and it does a funky speed change and remix of the song as it goes up the second lift hill and then goes backwards. Add to that the disco light show tunnel on the first hill, and you have a pretty fine boomerang. It's a great way to make an off-the-shelf coaster much more interesting. Unfortunately, it still suffers from the low capacity problems of other boomerangs, as it can only run one train, so if the park is very busy, you may need to skip this one.
Before Untamed, Goliath was the main reason to come to Walibi Holland. For a while it was the tallest coaster in the whole Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg area, even though I don't think there's any coasters in Luxembourg. That's how they market it. It's a pretty good fun coaster. It's in Untamed, almost a hyper but not quite, just slightly smaller than 200 feet.
This mega coaster is one of 7 other coasters to bear the name Goliath, with the other 6 being in North America. Despite not quite being tall enough to be considered a hypercoaster, it still has all the fun and the typical layout of a much bigger ride. It's a great coaster, and starts with a 150-foot drop reaching a speed of 65 miles an hour, before you go flying out of your seat on the first big sustained ejector airtime hill. After that, it hits a signature element, the eponymous Stengel Dive. This element is a 121-degree overbank combined with an airtime hill, and almost feels a bit like a precursor to some of the crazy RMC elements. It's named after Werner Stengel, a legendary roller coaster designer from Germany. The current royal blue colour scheme of the ride looks nice, but compared to the old green and purple colours, it seems a bit generic. At a glance at the track, you could be looking at any one of a number of coasters, such as Blue Fire or Alpina Blitz, but the previous colour scheme was much more iconic, and it's something that I miss. The old purple and green colours made this coaster instantly recognisable. And while it may not have been the most beautiful of colour schemes, it was unique, which is something that you can't say about the current colour scheme. Nitpicking about colour aside, this is a really great coaster, packing big time thrills into a smaller layout. It gives a good contrast to the ultra-modern Untamed in its weird twistiness, providing a more traditional and less complex layout, but still delivering on the thrills. The low-to-the-ground helixes over water, plus the trio of strong airtime hills at the end of the ride, make for a great coaster, and when it was built, it was certainly one of the top coasters in Europe. Prior to Untamed, Lost Gravity was the newest coaster in the park, debuting in 2016 as the first Mack Big Dipper coaster. I consider it Mack's answer to the Gerstlauer Eurofighter, with short 8-person trains performing steep drops and tight manoeuvres. Its trains have 2 central seats and 2 wing seats on each side, and when I first rode it, I loved the floorless flying wing seats. Unfortunately, these wing seats have become rather rough in the short time this coaster's been open, which is a little worrying. Whilst the 2 inner seats on each row give a fun, smooth ride, the wing seats are now getting very shaky, which isn't really something you expect from a modern Mack ride. Whilst the lap bar restraints mean that the shaking is quite forgiving, and it doesn't cause any headbanging, it's still a bit disappointing for such a new ride. Roughness aside, it has a fun layout, packing in a few inversions, airtime hills and some unusual turns into a very small footprint. It even has some special effects which sometimes fire when the ride is going, including a flamethrower and a water burst that fires as you go over the top of it, potentially getting the riders wet. Overall, it's a compact and fun coaster, and well worth riding, especially on the inside seats where it's not so rough. Express Platform 13 is a coaster that opened in 2000 as a Superman coaster, however it now has a much more sinister theme to it, appearing as a creepy subway station with a spooky walkthrough as part of the queue line. Now, if you've been to a Disney park before, there's a good chance you might have ridden a very similar coaster, the Rock and Roller Coaster. This is almost the exact same layout as Disney's famous launch coaster, except on this one, after the launch you're blasted outside, rather than staying inside like you do on the Disney one, so you can consider it a naked version of Rock and Roller Coaster. The park also has the original Vekoma Suspended Looping Coaster, or SLC, that goes by the name of El Condor. It's not good. This is a coaster to blame for more than 40 other SLCs, which are notorious for being rough, jerky, and more damaging to your ears than 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. Whilst there are a handful of decent SLCs out there, this isn't one of the good ones. Apart from coasters, there's a few other decent rides at Walibi Holland as well. They have some fun rapids, a good log flume, and a madhouse that I suspect may not be long for this world. It's a flat ride, similar to Hex at Alton Towers, or Houdini's Great Escape at Six Flags Parks, but this is now located in the area Untamed is in, and it just doesn't fit in with the rest of the park at all. Walibi Holland is also famous, or rather infamous, for their Halloween nights. I visited the park at Halloween last year, and whilst the atmosphere, mazes and rides were all great in the dark, it was just so incredibly busy that it wasn't as fun as it should have been. The general Halloween walkthrough areas are really well themed. There's a cool pirate one, and a neat video games gone wrong one that was really quite creative. Unfortunately, whilst the mazes are good, they're all upcharges, which makes for a rather expensive evening, especially if you want to beat the queues with fast passes. If you can afford it, and find a quiet day to visit, then Halloween is a great time to see the park, but be prepared for crowds and long queues for both the coasters and the mazes. Overall, the addition of Untamed cements Walibi Holland as one of the best parks in Europe for coaster fans. Combined with Goliath and Lost Gravity, this is a top lineup and makes the park well worth visiting. It's easily accessible by public transport from Amsterdam too, so it would make a great first trip for someone wanting to expand their coaster horizons. With the success of Untamed, I do wonder whether it might inspire other European parks to give their ageing wooden coasters the RMC treatment. There's certainly a few good candidates out there, such as Bandit at Movie Park Germany, or the awful Coaster Express at Warner Park Madrid, and also Stampeda at Portaventura could make an interesting RMC. Here's hoping that Untamed will lead to a new renaissance of RMC hybrid coasters in Europe. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing or sharing it. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Rollercoaster David, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.